at least of the recent modern history. I can't think of a more successful protest, because a protest is all about getting people to talk about your cause. And last I checked, people are talking about this cause. So, kudos to these guys on this.
Well, some people are talking about the cause, and then some people are talking about the why. And what I've chosen to do is, because I'm boycotting sponsors as well.
Right. Yes.
So it's one of those things where I'm doing an economic boycott as well. And as soon as my Verizon contract is up, I'm leaving Verizon.
Well, who are you going to go to?
I'm not sure.
Because you got to remember, DirecTV has the NFL Sunday Ticket. That's AT&T.
Right. Oh, believe me, I might be on Boost. I don't know, but we're gonna figure it out. But the thing is that what I try to do, because I engage people of all across the spectrum as well, and we get into these discussions, and they want to talk about the flag or this and that, and I say, no, let's talk about why we're kneeling, why we're boycotting. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about some of these statistics, these inequalities. Let's talk about the brutality. Let's talk about that. And what happens is that you get people, they want to talk about the what, but not the why. And when you stick to the why, they get quiet, or they get defensive, or they get argumentative. And they
what's the number one argument? The number one argument is what?
Black on black crime. Or they just don't know how. They who? What are you talking about? And when people love to bring up black on black crime, and then I say, well, something, white on white crime is at 87%. Why aren't we talking about that? If that's a true problem, why aren't we talking about those rates? Because it's not like white on white crime is at 16% or something like that. So it's within a few percentage points of black on black crime. But they don't, but people don't. When you throw that in their face, they switch. They switch the narrative. It's always about switching.
Well, a lot of them though, and just to tell you the counterpoint, which I've read a lot online, is they'll say, well, African Americans make up, depending on the poll you read, 13 to 15% of the overall population, and that data shows a strong tendency for African Americans to partake in violence, which is not something that is shown for white people. I don't know. I've never checked into the validity of those numbers, but that's the argument that you're going to hear from the right.
Yeah, and I've heard that argument, and I've debunked that argument with links that I of course can't share here, but that those numbers are skewed, because when you look at it. We can share links in our podcast. We can put links to this.
It's our podcast.
When we publish the podcast, we'll put a couple of these links into the.
Oh yeah, we'll throw some
feed.
links up.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and then also when you start talking about the crime rate, then you have to go down the rabbit hole of what leads to crime, the poverty rate, and what led to poverty. And,
right.
and we have to talk about redlining. We have to talk about the Homestead Act and how it was instituted. And we have to talk about the Headright Act and how it was instituted. And we have to talk about the GI Bill and how that was instituted. And a lot of times people don't want to talk about those things because they don't want to acknowledge the intergenerational effects of systemic racism and how it's created these things and how you create a cycle and how you when you give people limited hope, limited opportunities, when you're actively withdrawing resources from the community and leaving them with little options. I like to tell people this because a lot of people have seen this movie and a lot of people don't get the social commentary that was being made, was that if you look deeply into what they're talking about in the movie Trading Places, it's basically saying, if you take someone and you take away their options, you take away their privileges, you take away that hope, what do they do? What do they resort to? What did Dan Aykroyd resort to? How did Billy Ray Valentine change when he was given options, when he was given opportunities, when he was given privileges? You see? And people laugh their way through the commentary. And I really recently was watching the movie and recognized that. You have to understand when we're talking about crime, there's a lot of, and a lot of people want to put things in a vacuum and just say crime and it's cultural. That's another thing is that for some reason that it's a cultural thing that blacks or people of color are violent. That's the other argument I get. And it's just like, are you crazy? You know, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up poor. I grew up on government assistance. And, you know, in the neighborhoods I lived in, 99.9% of us were trying to do better, trying to get an education, trying to, you know, we would be walking down the street and we'd say, hey, Mark, what's up, man? Hey, man, you know, just trying to get off this aid, you know, it was that serious. We didn't want quote unquote handout. We didn't want to be on government assistance, and we were doing everything we could not to be, you know, and to call it cultural would suggest that that's just in our nature. And that is the narrative that's been promoted about people of color. And I think that people don't want to go into the context and perspective and the intergenerationalities of how certain things come to be in this society in America.
You know, all that is I think everything that's been said has essentially led to this point. There's a reason. We're not, and I say we, but the players are not just taking knees for the simple fact that they want to take a knee. They're not taking a knee to be disrespectful to our U.S. government. They're not taking a knee to necessarily be disrespectful to our country. We live in a country and a society where if we see something wrong, we the people have the ability to change it.
Right.
We the people have the authority and the ways to go about promoting that change. All the people, the athletes that are taking knees, the athletes that are showing solidarity, the coaches that are showing solidarity with the athletes and so on and so forth are doing is saying, hey, there is something wrong. We need to bring attention to it. A perfect example, and we could do this, guys, we could do this all night. Obviously, we don't have all night, but a perfect example would be there's a story where this person asks this little girl who plays on the team, you know, why would you ever take a knee? And the little girl looked at the person and said, well, I would take a knee because I'm hurt. Something hurts. That would be a reason to take a knee. America, as great of a country as it is, because I truly do believe that there's no other country I'd rather be in. I'm being absolutely honest.
Of course.
I'm absolutely honest when I say that there is no place I would rather be than America. But it does not take away from the fact that there is something systemically wrong, institutionally wrong, and that there needs to be things that are addressed. There are things that are laws that shouldn't be laws. Remember, at some point, it was a law to make African American slaves. That was a law. That doesn't make it right, but it was the law. And we, the people, stood up. We had a civil war about it to say, hey, these things have to stop. It's not going to keep going on like this. I think ultimately, you know, what everybody needs to truly understand is that there's a reason, there is a why. As you mentioned, there's a why. There's a specific reason, or many specific reasons that this is going on. And when you start to turn that off, all you're doing is saying you don't want to hear the reason. You just want to continue to focus on the act. And what you're doing is you're shutting it down without even letting it get off the ground.
Have you guys seen, I'm sorry, Haas, have you guys seen, and actually this is something I know Haas knows about, so I'm going to briefly touch on it here because I know we're running out of time. But when Kaepernick originally was sitting, he was approached by a guy who played briefly with the Seattle Supersonics. He was a veteran who was a long snapper for the University of Texas named Nate Boyer. And I know Haas knows all about this story.
He's an
Army veteran, an Army Ranger, if I recall. And he wrote a letter, an open letter to Kaepernick, and he said to him, he said, look, he said, sitting down and pretending that the anthem ain't going on ain't cool, bro. He's like, I think that it can be looked at as offensive to the United States military. And Kaepernick, they actually sat down. I don't know what the context of their...
They had a meeting.
And during this meeting, he said, look, when a soldier is killed in combat, the flag is folded, and it's delivered to the now Gold Star family of that deceased veteran by kneeling and handing them the flag. So it would be appropriate to me if you would kneel and pay respect to the flag, but take a knee because you're mourning something. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the context that was used, but more or less it works. So Kaepernick said, to his credit, he said, look, I'm cool with that. I'll do it. So for that reason, I have no problem with these players taking the knee for during the national anthem. I look at it as this. If you think that a song is more important than a life, then
that's the problem.
I got a problem with you.
Yeah, that's the problem. Okay? That's exactly what it is right
so
there.
Now I will say this. I understand that there are people that have a problem with it, and I respect your right to disagree. Okay? And I don't think any of us are here to say, you know what, you can't disagree with us.
No.
So, but at the same time, I think that it's also unfair to say, and as a white guy, anytime that and Haas knows this because Haas and I had lots of political discussions during the election.
Yes.
We agreed almost never, right? I despise HRC. I can't stand her. I could talk about her for a long time, okay? I voted for Gary Johnson. I wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump or for Hillary Clinton. So I voted for the person who, despite the fact that I know he wasn't, the greatest candidate in the history of the world, I thought of the choices, he was the best. So I voted for Gary Johnson. But so we don't always agree politically. I call myself a moderate. But when it comes to this whole situation, the right has gotten very ugly. But as a white guy, if I say, you know what, I think that this particular thing that Trump said isn't so bad, or that I agree that this family, who maybe they had a son killed in combat, and they're offended by this, I'm going to listen to that person. I'm going to say, okay, I understand that you're angry. I see your point, right? So when I do that, a lot of times people say, "Well, you must be a racist." But at the same time, right? I can say something to someone on the conservative side, and I don't even really think these people are conservatives. I'll call them ultra right. But they'll say, "Oh, well, you're anti-American if you are okay with these guys kneeling." So I kind of get caught in the middle once in a while, and I'm fine with that. I can fire my gun both ways. But it's this country that we live in has become a place where I'm not quite sure that I'm too pleased with bringing up 4 biracial children in. I have 2 kids who are half black. I have 2 other children, two little boys who are half Hispanic. And what kind of country? And in Haas, I know your kids are mixed as well. So what country? What kind of country are we bringing these children up in? And I think that's the thing that this show is here for. That's the reason why this show was started, because we're going to have, and I hate to take the hostship away from TJ here because he's the host. I'm not the host, but I'll tell you this: we're going to have people on this show who don't necessarily agree with any of us, and they're not going to be on this show for us to. And I'm pardon my French, but they're not going to be on this show to motherfuck them. Okay, no. That's not the whole point. The point of this show is going to be to open a dialogue and listen and engage respectfully, and to have some fun while we're doing it. We're going to make fun of each other.
Of course.
I'm staring at Haas's head right now. I need to put sunglasses on. It's so bright, right? But it's but that's why this show is here, and that's why I'm happy to be a part of this show. And this country, we can do better as Americans. Mm-hmm. And that's really all that it is. We can do better, and that's why we're the voice from the underground, because the voice from the underground is about to go above ground.
That's right.
We will be heard. We will not be silenced. You might not like us, You might love us.
Right.
But
You might
gonna
love
hear